this is an excellent view, seeing Dragon from the ground as it's re-entering back into Earth's atmosphere. Now that blackout period is expected to conclude at 2:25 a.m. Pacific time, so just a couple more minutes here, and then hopefully we'll get some comms back between the core and the crew. But in the meantime, at least got some cool views of the crew almost back down here on Earth.
Exactly right, and you know, making that kind of visual confirmation is such an important part of what we're tracking today. We're tracking a lot of very dynamic operations, and so being able to see what we see on the screen there is incredibly important for mission controllers.
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check.
Again, we may not hear the crew until they do get those comms back, that acquisition of signal.
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check.
SpaceX, Dragon, we have you loud and clear.
Dragon, we have you the same. Expect automated chute deployment.
Dragon copies, automated chute deploy.
Great news, as you heard there, we got comms from the X4 crew.
That's exactly what we're waiting for, and I love that you can hear the excitement in Peggy's voice, too.
Yeah.
It's like she's done this before.
Maybe a few times. A great live view on your screen inside of Dragon as they are re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, and we did hear confirmation that there will be the automatic drogue and parachute deployment coming up here shortly.
And on your screen with that great live view.
GPS converge, expect nominal altitude for drogue chute deploy.
Copy, nominal GPS chute deploy.
And we're going to hear a lot of comms back and forth throughout these last 5 minutes here as the core will be calling out their altitude as they're making their way down, as well as when the drogue parachutes deploy and the main parachutes deploy. And then as they get closer and closer to Earth, just keeping the crew updated with how close they are before splashdown so that they can expect that splashdown.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And those are the things that crew that you're seeing there on the left side of your screen are following along with their onboard telemetry. And for you at home as well, you can see on your screens as well. Things like vehicle speed, vehicle altitude. All those are really important metrics that we're trying to understand as part of the visual confirmations, the audio communications or the verbal communications that we've gotten with crew. We're also getting vehicle communications and telemetry to all understand how we're looking as we lead up to these next 4 minutes before.
And there you can see on your screen the seats are rotating for the crew. This prepares them for that splashdown, so they do
brace for drogue window.
They do reorient the crew depending on the dynamic events that are happening, so the crew does lean back during re-entry. And then they are sitting up a little bit more upright for those drogue and main parachutes to deploy.
That's right. Having them in that position helps distribute the forces correctly so that when they're experiencing that dynamic event, they're as comfortable as they can possibly be.
Yeah. We're now waiting for confirmation that the Dragon's chutes have deployed, coming up here just in under a minute or so. Just prior to the deployment of the initial drogue chutes, Dragon automatically safes the propulsion system. Dragon then deploys its drogue parachutes to stabilize and decelerate the vehicle. Then just before drogue deployment, seats automatically rotate to 26 degrees, which we just saw there, to keep the crew within acceptable G limits for entry and landing. And
excellent view.
Great view. Drogue parachutes are deployed. Looking forward.
Drogue descent rate nominal.
Descent rate nominal, copy.
Again, we're going to hear a lot of comms throughout this next 3 minutes here. This is looking forward on the Dragon spacecraft up at the chutes. The parachutes are fully deployed now, so we do expect those main parachutes to deploy here shortly.
if you're just joining us, we have now confirmed that the AX4 crew on their return home is roughly 2.5 minutes out from splashdown, and our main chutes have deployed.
Main chute descent rate nominal.
Copy. Main chute descent rate nominal, 1,000 meters for Dragon.
We copy 1,000 meters.
Great visual confirmation as well as those comms that the 4 main parachutes have deployed. Again, we are going to be slowing down the vehicle from 350 miles per hour all the way down to just about 15, 16 miles per hour by the time that the vehicle touches down and splashes down into the ocean.
Exactly right. You know, you mentioned these beautiful visual confirmations that we're getting. You know, an important aspect of today's specific splashdown is that it's occurring at night.
Dragon 800.
Copy, 800 meters.
Commander Peggy Whitson confirming the spacecraft's altitude as it's making its descent into the Pacific Ocean just off the coast of San Diego in Southern California.
Yes, love that it's coming off the coast of my hometown.
600 meters.
600 meters.
At 600 meters, we're just under a minute before that expected splashdown. The landing in water is a lot simpler and more reliable. Provides a little bit of margin against unlikely parachute issues. We did have to learn how to make Dragon waterproof as we are splashing down into the ocean. But
SpaceX copies 400 meters. Reminder to brace for splashdown.
that's a pretty cool view.
Yeah. That's right. Maintaining the vehicle's signature through things like cloud later and any kind of atmospheric disturbance allows us to maintain visual contact with the vehicle as it's making its final descent towards water landing.
And it's a little foggy, as you can see there.
Yeah, Pacific fog is rolling in.
We've got some very bright lights as Dragon, you can see the ocean there. Dragon is about to touch down in just a few seconds here.
And working their way towards the vehicle are the SpaceX and Axiom support teams that will be present for the next phase of our splashdown coverage today. At this point, we'll be waiting for confirmation of the crew's safe landing, and then we'll move into the phases of this mission, which are really, let's recover the vehicle, let's recover the crew, let's make our assessments, and at that point, we'll be covering.
And we have splashdown of the AX4 crew back on planet Earth.
Welcome home.
SpaceX Dragon splashdown. We are in Stable 1.
SpaceX copies splashdown in Stable 1. On behalf of SpaceX, welcome home.
And thanks for the great ride and the safe trip, and Grace is happy to be back.
We are happy to have you back home safely as well.
Some words between the Corps and our commander, Peggy Whitson, as the AX4 crew has made it back home, splashed down at
Dragon. SpaceX, for your awareness, SISTI system verifications are in progress. I will report back when recovery personnel are en route.
Dragon.
So now you can see a couple fast boats are going to be approaching the Dragon spacecraft. They're going to start with making sure that the spacecraft is safe. They're going to do some sniff checks. They're going to pick up those main parachutes. as Dragon splashed down, the chutes were immediately cut to make sure there's no safety issues there. So we'll pick up those main parachutes up. Once the crew deems that the spacecraft is safe, then our recovery vessel Shannon can begin to approach and begin the recovery process. So we are now eagerly waiting on recovery of our Dragon spacecraft with the AX-4 crew. Dragon has already autonomously completed several steps to save itself following splashdown.
So for those of you just joining us, the return of AX-4 has gone smoothly so far, and we just got great confirmation that crew has splashed down. So Dragon successfully re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, followed by deployment of its parachutes to slow the spacecraft down to a gentle 15 miles per hour. And at that point, they successfully splashed down in the Pacific Ocean at 2:31 a.m. Pacific time, off the coast of Southern California. So at this point, like you mentioned, Jesse, we are just waiting for Dragon's recovery from Shannon.
Yeah, upon detection of landing, Dragon automatically releases the main parachutes to prevent wind from pulling the spacecraft. Dragon then automatically saves any pyrotechnics still present on the vehicle and may automatically perform additional minor system reconfigurations. The astronauts remain seated and in their suits at this point, but the onboard air conditioning keeps temperatures in check inside the spacecraft, and the communication systems on board remain powered so the crew can continue to communicate.
And as we're watching, SpaceX has 2 fast boats in their recovery fleet, which move very quickly to get to the splashdown point. And those are being followed by Shannon, the main recovery vessel, which will move into position upwind of the spacecraft. The 2 fast boats have very specific roles here in these operations. The first fast boat makes initial contact and is focused on immediate safety inspection of the vehicle, checking for vehicle integrity and any presence of hypergolic propellant vapors. This ensures that it's safe for Shannon to approach the Dragon spacecraft. Now, once Dragon is cleared for full approach, the team begins rigging the spacecraft for water recovery by the recovery ship. The second fast boat is responsible for parachute recovery and also serves a redundant boat to the first. So we'll also see a team member on a jet ski helping to gather up the now detached parachutes that you mentioned came off.
Yeah, and it'll take a little over 10 minutes for the recovery crew to complete their safety checks. Then once they're complete, the team will begin preparing Dragon to be lifted into the recovery vessel. As part of the preparation for this lift, one member of the recovery team will climb on top of the spacecraft so that they can attach Dragon's hoist rings and connect the lifting lines. Now it will take us less than an hour to raise Dragon to the recovery boat and remove the crew from the spacecraft. And then after medical checkouts, the crew will return to shore by helicopter and then be flown back to Houston.
That's right. And each of these next steps are entirely dependent on the status of the crew. Axiom Space's
Dragon SpaceX, we have pulled go for recovery personnel approach. Expect fast boats alongside in 1 minute.
Dragon copies. We'll be waiting.
And with that call from Core to Commander Peggy Whitson, you can see now the fast boat making the 2 fast boats making an approach to the Dragon that you see in the middle of your screen with that flashing green beacon. Now, as we mentioned, Axiom Space's Chief Medical Officer is on the main recovery ship Shannon and is ready to put eyes on this crew for the first time since they departed quarantine together. And our medical teams will be with them every step of the way home.
It is nighttime, so we do have this infrared camera to help us see a little bit more clearly. That's the Dragon spacecraft in the middle of your screen there.
These SpaceX fast boats are now making initial contact with the Dragon spacecraft. Excuse me.
You can also see the red and green lights on Dragon, just similar to starboard and port on a ship. We have that for nights like this where it's a little bit harder to see the orientation of the vehicle, so those red and green lights help us understand which side of the vehicle and orientation that we are approaching. And it does look like they are pulling a main chute out of the water there. Again, those detach immediately as soon as the spacecraft splashes down. This helps prevent the wind from dragging the spacecraft after it's splashed down, and helps keep the crew safe. But we do recover those main parachutes, keep them out of the water.
Exactly. And as we just discussed, each of these fast boats has a very specific role that they play. That is all part of, again, the ground operations that support the retrieval and recovery of the spacecraft, as well as the X4 crew. So all of these are part of the ground training that's required in order to pull off those operations safely and successfully. So even though we're having, splashdown at night, right, we're able to ensure that we're executing smoothly, but executing successfully. We're now looking at some additional views that we're getting in of the fast boats making their contact with the Dragon spacecraft.
And we should be seeing a crew member actually climb on board the spacecraft.
Yep. Yep.
Do some final safety checks, and then help begin setting up the rigging for the spacecraft to be lifted out of the water.
That's right. It's all part of a coordination, a choreography of events, right? Getting from spacecraft is in the water. What are the next few steps that have to occur before we can get Dragon onto the recovery vessel Shannon? And this is a very key moment in that.
Yeah, and right now you can see them doing the sniffs, making sure that there's no hazardous gas or chemicals around the vehicle, and that it's safe for the team to actually approach and climb onto the spacecraft. And as always, the recovery crew is wearing the PPE necessary to perform these operations. PPE is personal protective equipment.
And it's a good reminder that even in this phase of the mission, we're excited crew is home, but the job's not done yet. We're taking this time to make sure that we're operating smoothly, that we're operating safely, so that we ensure a safe return for the crew on board the vessel and back home to their families and teams.
Yeah, we call conclusion of the mission when the crew egresses the
Yes.
spacecraft, and egress means to exit the spacecraft. Got some calm waters there, which is great.
Yes, exactly what we're
Southern
looking for.
California, Southern Pacific Ocean, as we splash down off the coast of San Diego today.
Dragon, SpaceX, hypergol sweeps, and unfired ordnance checks are nominal. Rigging is in progress. Approximately 5 minutes until capsule lift. We have SpaceX flight surgeon standing by. Please confirm crew are ready for post-splashdown PMC.
Dragon copy go, and we are ready for post-PMC.
Copy that, Dragon. The next call you hear will be from flight surgeon on Dragon to ground privatized.
And you heard those comms. The team is going to do some medical checks. They are going to do that on a private net. And that's what those comms were, confirming that they're switching the nets that they will be communicating on. And this is just to make sure that the crew is feeling okay.
Exactly right.
Through all those dynamic events. While for us watching Dragon re-enter the Earth's atmosphere from afar, there's a lot going on in that spacecraft there with the crew. So just making sure that the crew is feeling good, and checking in with how they're doing.
Exactly. It's an important touch point for kind of reaching a key milestone on the return trip home. As just mentioned, it's a very dynamic phase of flight. And those private medical conferences, or PMCs, with a SpaceX flight surgeon really allow ground teams to be able to make an initial assessment of crew while the team is also the ground teams outside are continuing to work that rigging. They mentioned it take about 25 minutes um, for crew to rig and then hoist the Dragon spacecraft into the recovery vessel. So while those operations are happening, crew will also be talking with ground medical personnel just to get an understanding of, hey, how's everybody doing? How are we looking forward to it?
Yeah. And they did confirm that the vehicle was safe to approach. They did some hypergol checks, and they also checked the thrusters that did not fire to make sure that there are no leaks from those thrusters. We do have Super Dracos on the vehicle in case of an abort emergency during ascent. We did not need those thrusters on this mission. And again, they are only used for the ascent portion, but we do want to make sure that throughout the mission, as the Dragon spacecraft was docked to the International Space Station for 18 days, that everything is still good and safe, again, to complete these final recovery operations. And again, it's a little dark because it's very early morning, but you can see the little window on Dragon and the light. Yeah, the little light inside there as the crew is patiently waiting recovery operations.
It's a very different view that they're having outside that window than they had for their flight up and their flight home.
Yes.
But all the same, I'm sure that they're also glad to say, hey, we're home. If you're just joining us from home, you are seeing live views of the Dragon spacecraft that has returned home from the Axiom 4 mission. After launching on June 25th, the Axiom 4 mission...
Dragon SpaceX, Dragon to ground is now unprivatized. Com check.
We have you loud and clear on Dragon ground.
Copy, Dragon. We have you the same.
Now see on the screen SpaceX support personnel beginning the rigging procedures to ensure that the Dragon spacecraft is rigged.
SpaceX, be advised, we're going to step into transitioning the forward link. Com will be unavailable for approximately 5 minutes. Rigging continues nominally.
Dragon copies, 5 minutes. LOS.
Again, the Corps just keeping the crew updated with the operations that they're performing. They won't have comms for about 5 minutes, but rigging is continuing, as we can see there, with the recovery crew member standing on top of the spacecraft.
Yeah, working very important procedures for the next phase of the AX-4 mission. And for those of you who have been following along since June 25th, when the Falcon 9 lifted off from Kennedy 39A, this was a pristine new Dragon. That crew had the privilege and the pleasure of naming Grace. And now that it's gone through its first mission and landed back safely in the Pacific Ocean, you can see exactly what the spacecraft goes through on its return home, but very much a sign of a successful mission.
Yeah, I love the tradition that the first crew that flies in the spacecraft get to name the spacecraft. And Peggy Whitson had some great words on why they named the spacecraft Grace, which I think is amazing. And we've got a great fleet of Dragon spacecraft. And speaking of Commander Peggy Whitson, she's actually our third frequent flyer.
Yeah.
Our first frequent flyer was Michael Lopez Alegria from Axiom Space.
Yep.
Second being Jared Isaacman when he flew on the Polaris Dawn mission. And now Peggy Whitson flying for a second time on a Dragon spacecraft. At SpaceX, we're trying to make these vehicles reusable, just like aircraft. When you fly and fly over again multiple times a day, and we're getting closer and closer to that with the same crew members flying again, which is awesome.
And it's important to note, right, that kind of mission-to-mission lineage, right, allows crew members like Peggy Whitson, like Michael Lopez Alegria, to better help inform the next crews that are coming with them, right? The more familiarity that you get with the vehicle, the better equipped you are on your mission. And as a personal Peggy super fan, I cannot imagine a more fitting astronaut to be able to give a name to a new vehicle. I love the messaging behind why they chose to name it Grace. And to your point, Jesse, about the frequent flyers, I loved that during launch. We could see I don't know if it's a new tradition, potentially, but we got to see some boarding passes that SpaceX provided to the AX-4 crew. And because of her frequent flyer status, Peggy Whitson got a gold boarding pass. And I absolutely adore that she was able to have that distinction.
Yes, just add it to her resume.
Yeah, you can add it to the resume. SpaceX frequent flyer.
Yeah, I love the boarding passes. Again, always trying to make it as common as aircraft, planes that we fly on every single day.
Exactly.
And we're still just in the beginning, but I feel like we've made a lot of progress in the last 5 years, and we still have a lot of new things, new missions, and improvements that we want to make to, future spacecraft and launch vehicles. So I'm excited for the future. I really do believe that we could get to aircraft, plane, regular flight, multiple flights a day within our future.
I think we can. And human spaceflight it's a team sport, and it is something that you are always learning from. No matter how commonplace any of these missions get, right? There is always the amount of training that you put into it to execute that plan, train, fly mentality, and being able to perform these missions, being able to say that Peggy has flown on multiple Dragon spacecraft at this point, kind of highlight that every time she's going to still go through the same training that she did for the last mission, that all these crew members, that all of the ground support personnel are going to be ready to support missions like these from even well before crew is on the launch pad, all the way through splashdown, pulling them onto the recovery vessel here for the Dragon spacecraft. And you can see on your screen both the fast boat and the recovery vessel Shannon making approach to Grace, our Dragon spacecraft.
There you can see what we call the Dragon nest. When the spacecraft is lifted up out of the water, it's going to seat into that ring that you see there at the end of the recovery vessel there. And once the spacecraft is nestled into the nest, it'll translate to a deck that meets the height of where the hatch on the Dragon spacecraft is. That'll enable the crew to egress or exit the spacecraft easily onto a platform in the recovery vessel.
And talking about the crew, Jesse, we've mentioned this idea of this kind of understanding the aspects of spaceflight, as mentioned earlier, being able to do STEM engagement on the mission, but also being able to spend time and honestly, your crew commander being somebody like Peggy Whitson, for Shooks and Suave and Tibor to be able to take that knowledge back to their respective space agencies and to their countries is a huge step forward for what you just mentioned earlier about making sure that that human spaceflight as a team sport continues for everybody to understand what's going on, because now Shooks and Suave and Tibor have a very important distinction, and they now have a very unique perspective on what it takes for a human spaceflight mission to occur. as first time astronauts, they're going to take back all that knowledge from their time on the International Space Station and be able to make huge impacts with their space agencies in their countries.
Yeah, I'm sure they learned a lot from Peggy Whitson, but also the other crew members that
Exactly.
are currently on board the International Space Station. They got to interact with so many different people with diverse skills.
Exactly.
And 18 days
Yeah,
is quite a long time
it
in
is.
space.
It is.
So it's a good amount of time. I believe this is the longest duration for an Axiom space mission so far.
That's right. You know, we heard a lot of those kind of sentiments shared between the AX-4 crew and the Expedition 73 crew currently on the International Space Station during their farewell ceremony, during their undocking last night. It really kind of underscored the aspect of once you're up there, once that hatch is open, it's all one team.
Mm-hmm.
It is like we keep saying it's a team sport, but once they were in there integrating with the Expedition 73 crew, that AX4 crew was learning so much more. And it was highlighted in everything that they were able to execute, right? We mentioned earlier over 60 research projects, over 20 STEM engagements, outreach events. Over 18 days, that's an incredible amount of time packed into their timeline, just coupled with sleeping, sleeping and being there, and also, but also like the aspects that they're not timeline, but engaging with the crew, sharing cultural touch points, understanding each other, getting to learn each other. And they did have the benefit of getting to meet this Expedition 73 crew before their flight. So by the time they were opening that hatch, they kind of knew each other. And I think it's an incredible aspect of this mission for sure.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
I wonder what their comms were. I'll meet you in space.
Exactly right. I wish I had the ability to say that. That'd be so cool.
One day when we're all able to fly in space.
All right, sounds good. I'll see you in space then.
See you in space, John. Looks like we're getting closer. They are pulling the spacecraft towards the recovery vessel. Looks like we're rigged up, and you can see the hydraulic lift moving forward and down. And then it will begin to lift the spacecraft out of the water and again into that Dragon nest that you see there on the recovery vessel. I think one of my favorite parts is the recovery crew that's on the spacecraft gets to jump into the ocean
That's right.
when
That's
they're
right.
done.
Yeah.
And it's nighttime in the Pacific, so it might be a little cold.
We'll be a little chilly.
But definitely a unique part of the job.
Exactly right. And you can see all the support crew. There's just a fast boat on the screen that made its way off screen there, but you can see the number of support crew that's kind of going into supporting an operation like this. You know, it may look like it's not happening very fast, but there are a lot of steps that each of these crew members are responsible for ensuring that the Dragon spacecraft is pulled into that nest safely but smoothly, and they're working towards that now. There he goes.
Love that. Despite the freezing temperatures, it looks fun.
And he got out of the water pretty fast, so I think you're right about that.
Right. Looks like lift is about to begin.
Those of you just tuning in, the AX4 crew splashed down off the coast of Southern California a little under 30 minutes ago, and we are now in the
Dragon SpaceX, rigging is complete. Stand by for capsule lift.
Dragon copies.
Dragon SpaceX, capsule lift in progress, brace.
good verbal confirmations there and visual confirmations that we're getting a successful lift.
Dragon copies.
Again, those comms crew can't see what's happening outside
Right.
of the spacecraft, so letting the crew know what's happening so they understand, the vehicle moving,
Exactly.
what those different feelings are with the spacecraft moving around.
Trying to give crew some level of situational awareness of where they are and where they're going next. So Dragon will remain in the nest during the crew extraction and for the journey back into port. The spacecraft is currently was just lifted, as you saw, and set on the nest. And from here, it'll be centered and oriented. And then from there, Dragon will be translated into the hangar underneath the helipad aboard the ship so that we can then open the hatch. And once open, a SpaceX medical doctor will be the first one in to check on the crew to see if they are ready to egress out of the vehicle. And as we noted earlier, Axiom medical teams are also on the recovery vessel working in tandem with SpaceX staff to assess and assist the crew.
The astronauts will egress, or what we call exit, from Dragon's side hatch, pending spacecraft orientation in the water. Before opening the hatch, the spacecraft's cabin pressure must be equalized with the outside environment. Now, once the hatch is opened, that will be the Axiom 4 crew's first breath of fresh air since boarding Falcon 9 at the start of their mission on June 25th.
And that will be an exciting moment for the crew, I know. But for the crew and also for the ground crews, getting that first confirmation of your crew exiting the spacecraft, getting good medical checks, and then coming out and giving a thumbs up is something everybody wants to be able to see, and we'll be able to see it soon.
Yeah. And it looks like the spacecraft is nestled into the nest.
Dragon, SpaceX, welcome aboard the recovery ship. Apology for the delayed call earlier. We are still working to transition the forward link. Recovery personnel are completing their final checks, and I will let you know when we are ready for translation across the deck to the egress platform.
Now they are de-rigging the spacecraft, but they're also doing some final sniff or leak checks and then covering the thruster locations prior to opening that hatch. Let's just make sure that the vehicle is more than safe for the crew members to exit the vehicle. Again, if you're just now joining us, the Dragon spacecraft has been lifted onto the recovery vessel Shannon. Now the recovery crew is safing the vehicle. They're putting some covers on the thrusters of the vehicle just to ensure, now that the spacecraft is no longer in operation, we don't need those thrusters. They did some sniff checks before they put some covers on it.
SpaceX, comm check.
We have you loud and clear in Dragon.
Copy that, Dragon. We have you the same. Welcome aboard the recovery ship. We are working to troubleshoot the forward link transition. Stand by for translation across the deck. I'll let you know when we're ready for that.
Okay, copy.
The crew is preparing for translation. This is where that Dragon nest is going to move the spacecraft towards the deck, and that deck is going to meet the bottom of the Dragon hatch, and that'll enable the crew to egress or exit the Dragon spacecraft onto a platform on the recovery vessel. And again, the recovery crew looks like they may have finished safing the vehicle in preparation for that translation.
As you mentioned, Jesse, that hatch that you see right in the center of the spacecraft, when we see crew egress from that, SpaceX medical personnel will be there to assess crew and assist them along with other ground support crew out of the spacecraft. And at that point, that will be our first time being able to see the AX-4 crew since their liftoff to the International Space Station on June 25th. On a side note, I do love seeing crew go into and come out of the hatch, whether it's the side hatch or whether it is the docking port. I love seeing the smiles on their faces.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting for them once we open this Dragon side hatch. Again, it'll be the first breath of fresh air in about 20 days for them since they boarded the Falcon 9 on launch day.
And it is an interesting distinction. You launch in the Atlantic and you splash down the Pacific. It's very different breaths of air that you're getting.
And you traveled all over space for thousands of miles.
288 orbits, something like 7.6 million miles. All just to come down across the country.
Millions of miles, I should say. It's definitely a great passport to have.
It is. Maybe that could be the next memento that we can provide crew before they lift off as a passport that they can see.
I think the locations would be orbits.
That'd be really cool.
Outside of Earth.
Yeah.
Earth orbits, low Earth orbit. Again, next up we are expecting the translation of the Dragon spacecraft named Grace, named by the Axiom Mission 4 crew. Again, the spacecraft will translate in preparation for hatch opening and exiting of the vehicle.
A few moments ago, Core spoke with the AX-4 crew to let them know that this the translation will be happening soon.
Dragon, SpaceX, final checks are complete. Translation across the deck to the egress platform will begin shortly. There is a chance that we get a lot of alarms. No concern.
Dragon copies. meters.
We have movement. Translation is beginning. Some residual ocean water sloshing down, and then we are washing down the hatch area. Again, just preparing for the vehicle's side hatch to be opened. Getting some of that salt water off, maybe some of that plasma from reentry off.
Right, all nominal processes to ensure that that crew can safely egress the vehicle, but also that ground personnel are safely protected while handling the spacecraft and crew as well. So at this point, we can see SpaceX personnel positioning themselves to support in this, as well as the spacecraft making final approaches to that upper landing pad for crew to egress the vehicle. freshwater wash down of the hatch area. We're seeing some final wipe downs as well. For those with a keen eye as well, you can see on the side of Grace, as it was making its approach towards the upper landing, the Axiom logo proudly displayed on the spacecraft. We had some great shots during the docking footage of SpaceX Axiom, making a beautiful image of the vehicle docked to the International Space Station. It's a little worn,
A little
but
toasty.
a little toasty.
A little toasty.
All part of nominal ops. So.
3,500 degrees Fahrenheit
That'll
will do that.
Dragon, SpaceX, stand by for side hatch opening and egress of some smiling faces.
Here we go.
All right, we're looking forward to it.
They are just about to open that side hatch, and again, first person that'll greet the crew will be the medical officer.
The hatch is open, and ground crews are making first contact with the Axiom 4 crew.
See that square looking tool, that's just a protector for the hatch seal for while the crew egresses. This is a reusable vehicle, so we are protecting both the crew as well as the spacecraft, making sure there's no damage that happens and that the crew doesn't bump their head on anything on the spacecraft. Looks like we're getting, the crew's getting some first photos.
Yep. It's a good sign that they had good initial comms with medical personnel. So this time we are now just, if you're just joining us, we're waiting for the AX4 crew to egress or exit the Dragon spacecraft, also known as Grace, as part of the conclusion of their more than 20-day mission to the International Space Station.
See the crew is handing some of their cargo. That looks like their tablets that they use throughout their mission.
Making it a little easier for crew to make their way out of the spacecraft as well.
It's like they just removed the footrests. Gives the crew some space to get out of their seats while they are exiting the vehicle.
Now getting some great internal views of the AX-4 crew.
Yes. I already saw some big smiles, as people we've all been saying.
As we wait for the AX-4 crew to egress the vehicle, you can see ground crew is still putting in aspects of I'm not going to call it rigging, but hardware to help the crew get out of the spacecraft more easily. Reminder that they've been in microgravity for a little over 20 days, and occasionally your first few steps back on Earth can be slightly challenging.
It's a little different in microgravity than dealing with the gravity here on Earth. Just now joining us, we are waiting for the AX-4 crew to exit the Dragon spacecraft Grace. Peggy, Shooks, Suave, and Tibor are at the end of their Axiom Mission 4. After 20 days in space, 18 on board the International Space Station. 18 days.
Now this wraps up a very significant portion of the mission, but it's not entirely over. We still have a few medical checks to go, and then in addition to that, the AX-4, all the research done on the AX-4 mission is all going to be in a world of post-processing, analysis, assessment, and that's all part of it, as well as crew debriefs. So, following after crew egresses the spacecraft and gets good medical checks, at that point we'll be getting the crew back home, and then continuing the final, we'll call it terrestrial-based operations of the
That's
AX-4
right.
mission.
I guess it's more of the end of the space-facing portion of the mission.
Operational phases. Right. We're still going to take our time to get there. You can see ground crews are still working with the crew members and hardware inside. They've established some ground support equipment to help in the aid of the AX-4 crew getting out of the spacecraft.
And some of their aides are not too complex. That white platform that you see there is essentially a slide.
Yeah. But an important one.
A very important slide.
But in addition to that slide, we do have, there's a complex tool that you mentioned earlier, Jesse, about protecting the seals. We can see now first crew members looking to make their egress from spacecraft along that slide.
Sliding out.
And there she is. We see Commander Peggy Whitson, all smiles, exiting the spacecraft Grace. That is a beautiful sight. Peggy Whitson, the AX-4 commander, is home, having logged 695 days in space on 5 flights. She is the 7th on the all-time list for most days in space by a human. It's an incredible feat.
Legendary. So far, we've had Commander Peggy Whitson exit the Dragon spacecraft. We are waiting for the remaining 3 crew members of the AX-4 crew. There's no real order to the egress. It's really up to the crew. So we're patiently waiting to see who's up next.
Right. If Peggy is in the indication, which I think she is for this particular crew, we'll see another big smile coming out of the Dragon spacecraft in a moment.
And we've got our pilot, Shubhanshu Shukla, as our 2nd crew member exiting the spacecraft. And some big smiles, as you said. India reached a major milestone for the nation's space exploration goals. AX-4 pilot Shubhanshu Shukla became the first astronaut to fly from the country's newly established astronaut corps. His participation marks a vital step forward for ISRO's Gaganyaan program, which aims to send Indian astronauts into space aboard domestically developed spacecraft. Shukla's flight demonstrates India's readiness to execute international missions and reflects the country's broader ambitions to become a key player in the global space community. As India continues to expand its capabilities in crewed spaceflight, this mission serves as both a proving ground and a symbol of its commitment to innovation, collaboration, and leadership in space exploration.
At this time, we are waiting for the mission specialists of the AX-4 mission, Sławomir Uznański-Wiśniewski of Poland and Tibor Kapu of Hungary, to now egress the Dragon spacecraft. third crew member now egressing the vehicle. There is Sławomir Uznański-Wiśniewski of Poland. Sław is all smiles for this, which I love to see. Now, Poland's participation in the AX-4 mission through the Ignis program marked a pivotal step in the country's growing role in space exploration. Astronaut Sławomir Uznański-Wiśniewski, flying in partnership with the European Space Agency, led a research agenda focused on some of the most pressing challenges in human spaceflight: mental health, artificial intelligence, and radiation monitoring. These areas are critical not only for ensuring astronaut well-being on long-duration missions, but also for enabling safe and sustainable exploration beyond low Earth orbit. The Ignis mission reflects Poland's strategic investment in cutting-edge science and its ambition to contribute meaningfully to the future of deep space travel. It also signals a broader shift in Europe's space landscape, where emerging space nations are taking on increasingly vital roles in shaping the next era of exploration. And based on that smile, I'd say Sław felt like he had a very successful mission.
4 crew members have exited the Dragon spacecraft. We're now just waiting for the final crew member, Tibor, to exit the spacecraft here. And last but not least, mission specialist Tibor Kapu. Hungary marked a significant milestone in its space ambitions with the AX-4 mission as astronaut Tibor Kapu became the first Hungarian to reach the International Space Station, and all smiles from him there. His participation under the banner of the Hunor Hungarian to Orbit program represents Hungary's commitment to advancing its role in international space exploration. This mission signifies the country's return to human spaceflight after decades and highlights its strategic investment in science, technology, and innovation.
And Jesse, it was wonderful seeing Tibor's smiles and waves and high fives. You knew how important this mission was to the crew as they were prepping for it and throughout the mission, and seeing them be able to egress with the same smiles that they went into the capsule with, or into the spacecraft with. Well, at this point, the crew is now safely back home on Earth.
Yeah. Now that our crew are safely back home on Earth and getting the first checks by SpaceX and Axiom space medical teams, we're going to wrap up our live coverage of their historic return. AX-4 lifted off from Launch Complex from Launch Pad 39A at 2:31 a.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday, June 25th, and arrived at station on Thursday, June 26th. They spent about 20 days in space and 18 of those days on the International Space Station before undocking yesterday. And then this morning at 2:31 a.m. Pacific Time, they splashed down off the coast of San Diego, California. What an amazing journey it's been for them so far.
Yeah, it's been absolutely incredible. And Jesse, it's been fantastic again sharing desk with you. Thank you so much for joining me on this, and I'm glad we got to spend this time together. But now this crew's entire trip is home, we're ready to move on to the next phase of the mission. So to SpaceX, thank you for an incredible flight and taking such great care of our crew. To NASA, the International Space Station partners, and the Expedition 73 crew, thank you for helping make the efforts of the AX-4 mission possible. We're really looking forward to collaborating with everyone again soon.